Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
I will just read the English translations, and there are no purports as such until we get to 45. I think there's one line there which says this concludes. Let's see. Verse 38. Lord Krishna summoned Satyajit to the royal assembly. There, in the presence of King Ugrasena, Krishna announced the recovery of the jewel and then formally presented it to Satyajit. What is the jewel here? Shamantaka. Text 39. Hanging his head in great shame, Satyajit took the gem and returned home, all the while feeling remorse for his sinful behavior. Text 40 to 42. Pondering over his grievous offense and worried about the possibility of conflict with the Lord's mighty devotees, King Satyajit thought, how can I cleanse myself of my contamination? And how may Lord Achyuta become satisfied with me? What can I do to regain my good fortune and avoid being cursed by the populace for being so short-sighted, miserly, foolish, and avaricious? I shall give my daughter, the jewel of all women, to the Lord, together with the Shamantaka jewel. Thus, indeed, it is the only proper way to pacify him. Having thus intelligently made up his mind, King Satyajit personally arranged to present Lord Krishna with his fair daughter and the Shamantaka jewel. Text 44. The Lord then married Satyabhama in proper religious fashion, possessed of excellent behavior, along with beauty, broad-mindedness, and other good qualities. She had been sought by many men. This is where there might be some comment. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that men such as Kritavarma had sought the hand of Satyabhama. It turns out that Satyajit had promised her hand to Kritavarma. He had, yeah. Kritavarma, I think Akrura as well might have been promised Satyabhama's hand in marriage as well.
What comes up very often,
Yeah,
especially we're in a different culture and a different age, people say, how can you hand a girl around like a piece of furniture?
Right.
I'm gonna give you her. You know,
right.
what do we respond to people who ask that legitimate question?
Yeah,
Maybe they heard the question, maybe they didn't.
okay. So the question being asked here is about handing over a girl in marriage like she is property. And people raise an objection to that. A different cultural context is difficult for people to understand today. And the question is, how do we respond to it? And my response is that it is a different time, and we don't need to defend cultural practices of a Vedic era. Our practice is bhakti. We defend bhakti. We defend love for Krishna. And I mean, there are practices, activities described in the Bhagavatam that are not Vaishnava practices, but they were Vedic. Human sacrifices, as an example, you'll find them in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, first chapters. We're not going to defend that. It has nothing to do with bhakti. It's demigod worship. It's human being sacrificed for the pleasure of a particular demigod for a particular reward. We don't need to defend that. Yeah.
I wouldn't.
We're still sharing the Bhagavatam here. But...
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word defend. I would offer explanation. Srila Prabhupada explains that the relationship between the father and the daughter was a very deep, loving relationship with lots of trust. And the father was caring for the daughter, protecting the daughter. And the daughter had so much trust in her father that she would understand that my father can select somebody who will be qualified to take the best care of me. They had so much trust in the character and the relationship with the father that they were willing to say, if this is what you think would be good, I will be happy to follow your, not that she's given away as a gift or as a nothing, as a piece of furniture, but this is like an example of a level of trust that we don't even suspect at this time, and a level of care and intelligence and wisdom that the father would know that this marriage is meant for devotional service to Krishna, and and that this husband is someone who will help my daughter in every way in her life in the best possible way. So it was accepted. It wasn't, by the daughter and the father, and it was intelligent and kind and wise and scriptural, and the idea of romantic love was kind of silly. Anyway, that's what I've heard from Prabhupada. So
Sure. Yeah.
sometimes people feel, well, how can you give away a woman?
Yeah.
Like Vasudeva is indicating I'm talking to women.
Haribo.
Been dismissed.
Thank you. Thank you for raising and addressing that question. So text 45 is the concluding verse for this chapter. The Supreme Personality of Godhead told Satyajit, we do not care to take this jewel back, O king. You are the sun god's devotee, so let it stay in your position. Thus, we will try to enjoy its benefits. Purport by disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Satyajit should have worshipped Lord Krishna, the Supreme God. Thus, there is certainly a touch of irony in Lord Krishna's saying, after all, you are a devotee of the sun god. Furthermore, Krishna had already acquired Satyajit's greatest treasure, the pure and beautiful Satyabhama. Thus ends the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 56th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Shamantaka Jewel. Jai Ho. So we stop sharing and offer some reflections on these verses. So yeah, just as a point of interest, there's a jewel in the British crown, the crown jewels called Koh-i-Noor, very famous, comes up a lot in our times, needs to be repatriated to India. It's 105 carat diamond. It's said to be worth about $500 million. So, and there is a long history, and there's a lot of myth and legend around this jewel, owned by many, many kings, many of whom were murdered. It was finally gifted to Queen Victoria. Apparently, queens or females are not affected by the curse. Males are. I was hoping to see it recently. There was a coronation. King Charles was coronated, and I thought we might see that jewel in the crown worn by the Queen. That was Queen Camilla, wore a particular crown where that jewel is traditionally set. But it was altered prior to the coronation, and that jewel was not included. So yeah, I was looking forward to seeing that. Why am I speaking about this in the Bhagavatam class? Because one of the myths related to that jewel is that it is the Shamantaka jewel, which I doubt, but it is if you look up to read about the history of the Koh-i-Noor, generally it will be included there that it is said by some fabled to be the famous shaman Takajul. I doubt it because the shaman Takajul described in the Bhagavatam is even more glorious than that. It produces kilos of gold every day, and there is no calamity wherever that jewel is kept. So we can reflect on a few things. One is dealing with criticism. Krishna has been criticized by Satyajit. Satyajit found fault with Krishna. He spread rumors about Krishna. There was suspicion among the people about Krishna and his character. And so we can reflect on this. Verse 38 says, Krishna summoned Satyajit to the royal assembly. There, in the presence of King Ugrasen, Krishna announced how he had recovered the jewel. Not that he had it, but he had recovered it. And he described the history of its recovery. He had gone into the forest with witnesses. He had come across a lion. He had followed the trail of that lion's death. He came across a dead lion. He followed the trail further, came to a cave, entered the cave. Witnesses saw him go in without the jewel. And he didn't come out for a very long time. Finally, he returned to Dwarka with the jewel and a princess, Jambavati. In the cave, he had met Jambavan. He had fought for many days. The witnesses waiting outside thought eventually that something must have happened to him in there. And they grieved, and they came back to Dwarka and said, something's happened to Krishna. And they all went to the temple to mourn Krishna's demise, his passing. But then Krishna arrives with the jewel, with Jambavati, summons Satyajit to explain to him publicly what has happened. And in all of this, Krishna making this public display, he's clearing his name. He's clearing his name because when Satyajit's brother, Prasena, had worn the jewel and gone riding into the forest, he had been killed there, and the jewel had been lost. And Satyajit, he put two and two together. Krishna had earlier asked me for this jewel. He told me to give it to Maharaj Ugrasen because the best of all things should be given to the king. And I refused him. And because I refused him, then he took it by force. That was Satyajit's surmising, but then he conflated it and spread it as a rumor as fact. And people in Dwarka started to have doubts about Krishna. This was a story that was being told in the bazaars of Dwarka. And so Krishna, he wanted to set the record straight. And he made the effort to go and find the jewel, to bring it back and publicly hand it back to Satyajit. I did not have this jewel, but here, have it back. It's yours, was given to you by the sun god. So we can reflect on this about in relation to criticism. Here we see even Krishna is not spared criticism, gossip, enmity, misjudgment. Similarly, Lord Chaitanya was criticized. It was claimed that he was manufacturing something new, something that was contrary to Vedic teaching, taking the sacred mantras that are generally secret and singing them publicly and inviting people of all classes to chant these mantras loudly And there 2 rules are being broken. 1, secret mantras being chanted loudly. 2, common people chanting mantras that should only be vibrated by qualified brahmanas. The brahmanas claimed that the mantras would lose their potency on account of these 2 transgressions. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is criticized by the Brahmana hegemony. He was criticized by, famously, by Ramachandra Puri. He eats too much. There was he eats sweets, or he came up with different reasons to criticize Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prabhupada was criticized for whatever innovation he had to make to spread Krishna consciousness in the Western world, giving second initiation to females, allowing females to reside in the ashram, which is generally a place where males, monks, will reside. So Prabhupada's criticized. More than likely, your spiritual masters, my spiritual master, is criticized, and you will be criticized as well. And so we can think about, we can reflect here, how is Krishna dealing with this criticism? One thing is, if Krishna is criticized, Lord Chaitanya is criticized, Prabhupada is criticized, my Guru Maharaj is criticized, I'm criticized, don't be gullible. Don't allow criticism to confuse you. Envious people will criticize. They will find fault, particularly of devotees in positions of authority. And so don't allow it to disturb your spiritual life. Don't allow it to shake your faith. There will be criticism. Don't think, where there is smoke, there must be fire. If someone's criticizing and finding fault, there must be something wrong. Otherwise, how would this be possible? The envious mentality, the envious mind, will find fault even where it doesn't exist. The envious mentality will project motivations, intentions, and so we need to be aware of this. We can take insight from the Bhagavatam itself. Krishna, faultless, being criticized, being accused of murder, being accused of theft, where it doesn't exist. It's a projection, a conjecture passed around as fact. And it's spread among the residents of Dwarka, no less. These are Krishna's own people, people that he protects, the people that he loves and love him. They've been confused by this rumor. So they can even question.
I've heard it said that it says, and Jesus said, if you follow me, you will be persecuted.
Right.
So when criticism comes, like you said, we should go on with our presenting what we've heard from our spiritual master. But the temptation would be to water it down a little bit so that we can just kind of blend in a little bit. And if you're going against the river, there's going to be splashing, sparks. There's going to be some resistance because we're meant to bring about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's mystery. So I think it's also important, as far as I know, is careful. It's good to be careful that we don't dial it back so far that Prabhupada used the word watered down.
Yeah. So you're talking about criticism by the non-devotees. In order to avoid criticism, we might water things down. And you're saying we shouldn't be so concerned about criticism that we stop preaching, basically. Yep, good point. Yeah, I was hinting at criticism by devotees. In Dwarka, you have Krishna's own people, criticizing him, and that happens in the devotional community as well. Okay, so one thing, don't be confused by criticism of devotees. Now, then we can raise the question, but what about if there is actually a fault? What about if there is actually something wrong that does need to be pointed out? Here we need to be very cautious and very, very careful. Sadhu Shabdan is a Bengali proverb. It says, Vaishnava, beware. Be careful of criticizing or finding fault with the devotee. If it's not our business to be concerned or involved, my policy at least is leave it aside, leave it to Krishna, and leave it to other senior devotees to deal with. Why jeopardy our own spiritual development? If it is our business, and there are other devotees that we are responsible for and need to protect, well, definitely you should do your research before arriving at any conclusions. And it's so important to maintain proper etiquette in dealing with a situation where there has been some violation. Bhagavatam also gives us examples like that. Very famously, the head of our Sampradaya, we have the Brahma Manva Gaudiya Sampradaya, and the third canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, describes how during creation, Brahma became attracted to his own daughter, Vak, and chased after her. How to deal with a situation like that? Well, we also had an example in that instance of how the devotees, his followers, his disciples, dealt with the situation. They approached him respectfully and said, "Dear Father, dear spiritual master, Lord Brahma, your behavior is not appropriate. Please desist from what you're doing." When we're overcome by lust, when we're overcome by passion, it's difficult to hear good counsel. And Brahma could not hear from his sons. And he continued with his misbehavior. They appealed to him, "Dear Brahma, no other Brahma has ever behaved like this before. You're the first. Please refrain from this activity." And when they saw that their request, their appeal to him had no effect, what was their second line of recourse? There was no one to go to. Well, they went to his authority. Who is Brahma's authority? Krishna. They went to his guru. They went to Brahma's guru, to his spiritual master, to his authority. They prayed to Krishna and said, "Please, Krishna, guide our father, guide our spiritual master, Lord Brahma." And when Brahma saw the sages praying for him, when Brahma saw the sages concerned for his welfare, then he realized, he got his wits about him once again. He came back to understand that he needs to control his passion, and he cast off that lust, that subtle body of attachment, and purified himself and reinstated him, and he was reinstated in his devotional service, which is also interesting. He wasn't told thereafter, "You are forever banned from any service because of your misbehavior." He continued with his service, and his sons and disciples, well, he's still the head of our Sampradaya. So there's a lot of instruction there for us. Now we can also think about what to do when we are criticized, when you're criticized, when I'm criticized. One thing is, okay, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised that other devotees are criticized. Don't be surprised that you are criticized either, particularly if you're taking responsibility, some important service. Someone's going to find fault. Krishna says every endeavor in this world has some fault. If you have some service that involves power or control over wealth or fame, then you will likely be targeted. People will be envious in one way or another. That's an unfortunate fact of life. And you can think about this criticism as part of the burden or sacrifice that you carry, like what you were saying, Adi Purush Prabhu. Part of the burden of being Krishna's devotee, or as a disciple, or as a preacher, is that you acknowledge, yes, I will face criticism. It's part of the role. That said, this doesn't mean that we don't accept any critique at all. Yeah, so there might be valid criticism as well. But what we need to do is to decide for ourselves which criticism we're going to take seriously. If there's criticism from someone whom we know is our well-wisher, someone who's always been there as a friend and an advisor and a support, and when they come and say something's wrong, needs to be corrected, that we should take very seriously. When there's criticisms coming from someone who's never shown any care or concern, support, well wishes, then we don't need to take that criticism too seriously. If it is disturbing us, go and get confirmation from someone you do know is your well-wisher and someone who does have your best interests at heart. Now, I've said not to really worry about it, but here we see Krishna did worry. Krishna was concerned. Satyajit wasn't a well-wisher. He didn't have Krishna's best interests at heart. But Krishna did respond by publicly making an effort to right the wrong. And so how does that sit with what I was just saying about don't be concerned if someone's not your well-wisher? Here my thought is that if other people who depend on you are confused because you're in a position of authority, then you must explain to them. You must set the record straight. So this is the case here. Krishna is the king. He's the prince. He's the ruler. He's the leader of the citizens, of devotees. And the people are confused. And so it is part of Krishna's role as well to explain to them or set the record straight so that they are not confused by this criticism. Otherwise, for ourselves, we don't need to really pay attention to such criticism. Okay, so we are at time, but I do want to address one other point from the other verses, 39 to 45, and that is Satyajit's remorse. So we have been discussing how to deal with criticism of others, of ourselves. What about if we are the one who has criticized? What about if we are the person who is at fault here for spreading that rumor or jumping to conclusions or in any way falsely accusing others? What we can learn from Satyajit's example, he's feeling shameful, he's feeling remorse now that it has been proven that his criticism was wrong, it was unfounded, it was misplaced. Then he has made an effort to set things right as well from his side. And so there's much that we can learn. He has offered the jewel back to Krishna. He's also offered his jewel of a daughter, Satyabhama, in marriage to Krishna. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, actually, this is the real reason for this whole pastime, so that Satyabhama, Krishna's eternal consort, and Krishna will be united in marriage. So all of this drama to facilitate that union. We can think more in depth about Satyajit's remorse and how we might deal with a situation where we have wrongly accused another or jump to conclusions about another. The first thing is to acknowledge the mistake. Genuine remorse is initiated by an apology and an acknowledgement that we have made a mistake. And so Satyajit realized his error in wrongly accusing Krishna, and this self-awareness is crucial. It requires humility to admit we made a mistake. But it is necessary to apologize, especially if our actions have caused harm or disturbance to others. We need to feel the weight of our actions. Remorse is a deep emotional understanding of regret for the wrong we have done. So Satyajit hasn't just realized his mistake at an intellectual level. He feels it deeply. He recognizes the implications of what he's done, the social implications. He's saying, devotees are disturbed. Devotees will be angry with me. These are part of his reflection. And so this is necessary for a true apology. And then there is making amends. So apologies are not just about words, they're also about actions. And so Satyajit has sought to take action in making amends. One of the actions is to give the jewel back to Krishna. You asked for it, I refused, I lost it, then I accused you. I see that this jewel is at the center of all of this misunderstanding. You please have it, Krishna. Krishna hasn't accepted it, but that gesture of taking action to address, to make amends, is very important. Moreover, he's offered his daughter, Satyabhama, in marriage to Krishna. And this indicates his desire to really restore a bond of familial relations, close relations with Krishna. Lastly, we need to accept the consequences. Krishna has accepted Satyabhama's hand, so there's an acceptance of Satyajit's apology, but he's also, but at the same time, he's refused the jewel. Yes, I accept your daughter's hand in marriage, but you keep the jewel. After all, you're the devotee of the sun god, Vivishwan. And so we need to accept the consequences of how our apology and our seeking to make amends is received. Bhaktivinoda Thakur addresses this in his book Bhakti Aloka. He says, sometimes you'll offend the Vaishnava and you will go to the Vaishnava and say, please forgive me. And the Vaishnava feels that offense to be so strongly in their hearts that they're unable to forgive. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, you shouldn't conclude, that proves that my criticism was correct, because this person isn't a real Vaishnava, because Vaishnavas are forgiving. This person hasn't accepted my apology. They're not a real Vaishnava. I'm off the hook. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says you cannot do that. If you have offended a Vaishnava to such an extent that they don't want to forgive you, then you're in a very dire situation. And he says, don't conclude that this person isn't a Vaishnava, that they won't forgive. He says, you have to go and pray to Krishna that I am so sinful. I have offended this Vaishnava in such a deep way that they can't even, Vaishnavas are forgiving. This Vaishnava can't even find it in their heart to forgive me. Krishna, what is my position to be? And he says, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, when you adopt that attitude, then Krishna will in time forgive. Krishna himself will forgive. But if you have that attitude of humility in approaching Krishna with prayerfulness and an attitude that my offense is so grave that even the Vaishnavas will not forgive me. So there I conclude I've spoken about 2 points. Verse 38, we spoke about in relation to how to deal with criticism, how to act when other devotees are criticized, when we are criticized as well. And then the other verses, 39 to 45, have spoken about how to act when we have wrongly criticized or accused others and caused offense. So I see Jeffrey has a question, but before I go to Jeffrey, let me ask in the temple room if there are any questions, comments, reflections on this weighty topic of Vaishnava Aparad. Just a second.
Yeah, just referring to Shastra, it says in Shastra that Krishna is very unhappy to see conflict between devotees. And if, this is what it says in the scripture, if there's some disturbance between you and your godbrother, don't bring your gift to the altar. First resolve,
Yeah.
endeavor,
Right.
repeatedly, intensely, bring others into it, and somehow they resolve the conflict, and then continue your worship.
Right.
Because somehow or other, it's so, Krishna is so unhappy to see conflict like that. And definitely we have to repent, we have to acknowledge our misdeeds, and then reach out to each other to make some reconciliation.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. So the two examples that come to mind are Ambarish Maharaj and Durasamuni. Durasamuni offended Ambarish Maharaj by trying to kill him, and then Krishna defended or protected his devotee by sending Sudarshan. And then Ambarish Maharaj went to Vishnu and said, please withdraw your Sudarshan, I'm sorry. And Vishnu said, I can't forgive you. You have to go back to the devotee that you have offended.
Yeah.
When that devotee forgives you, then I'll be able to forgive. Otherwise, I'm not able to forgive an offense to my devotee. Very, very beautiful section of the Bhagavatam where the Narayan says, my heart is the heart of the devotee is in my heart, and I am in the heart of my devotee. So when you offend my devotee, you offend me. When you offend me, you offend my devotee. That's the loving bond there. And then Gopal Chapal, similar type story in Chaitanya Lila. Gopal Chapal had offended Srivas Thakur, had contracted, was it Haridas? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one as well. Yeah. Okay. So Gopal Chapal had offended Haridas Thakur. And there's one with Srivas Thakur as well. Srivas. Yeah. So Gopal Chakravarti. Two Gopals and devotees offended. And Gopal Chakravarti then he contracted leprosy and approached Lord Chaitanya and said, please forgive me. And Lord Chaitanya said, I can't forgive you when you have offended my devotee. If you want forgiveness, you have to approach the devotee whom you have offended. So that's the principle. I like the way you said it though, Prabhu. Don't bring your jewel to the altar. Yeah. Very nice. Okay. Yes.
You come, there's 23 people online.
Okay.
Otherwise, I could repeat the question loudly. And, yeah.
Many times it could be seen that authorities also take it as their absolute authority. you know?
Uh-huh.
And in that case, even if you say that some decisions were wrong,
Right,
and that the devotee was really wrong in that situation,
right,
it is also brought into notice of that authority that was wrong decision.
right,
They still continue with it.
right,
And that affects not only the devotee, it affects their whole life. It could be affecting their families,
right,
yeah. And over a period of time, uh, it still goes without any reconciliation,
right,
because they think that, you know, it is my authority to do that way. And because it affects the devotee's life a lot, they're not able to forgive.
right.
They don't want to, go back.
Reconcile, yeah, yeah. So a comment here that sometimes authorities, like community temple authorities, will make a decision about a devotee, pass a judgment, which you're suggesting may or may not be right, but it has an impact on this devotee's life for many, many, many years going forward. Their lives are disrupted and they can't bring their lives together, and they feel a lot of pain in their heart, and they're unable to forgive and resolve it. They lose their faith and are unable to move forward from that. Yeah, we've seen that.
So in that situation, the receiving part, the devotee, what should be that devotee's perspective of going on, and then
Right. So the question is then, how should that devotee who is on the receiving end of that judgment, how should they carry on? And so two comments. This is very, very complex. Two comments. One is that being in a position of authority where you need to make decisions, it's not easy, even thankless. It takes a lot of courage, and decisions do need to be made. And sometimes we like consensus, but it's not always possible. And when the decision is made, one party are happy and the other party are not. They feel the decision's been made against them. In an ideal scenario, in a spiritual community, we accept, well, that is the prerogative of this devotee who's in that position of authority. Someone needs to make decisions. It's their prerogative. Even though I don't like the outcome, I will accept it and move forward. But that's so that's an ideal. Sometimes, even often, sometimes that decision made is really taken, is felt in a very personal way. And you'll say the ramifications are that one's life are very, very seriously disrupted. So, and faith is undermined. So how to deal there? There, I would say that life will pose setbacks, so we can be a victim to our circumstances, and we can hold the hurt and the anger. Or even if we have truly been wronged, we can try to, as a Vaishnava, adopt humility and forgiveness, and also see somehow this was Krishna's will. Somehow this was Krishna's hand here.
unfortunately, then what happens is that deeply affects our faith furthermore.
Right.
No?
Sure. Yeah.
Krishna, you allowing this to happen?
Those are Krishna's tests. Yeah. So Prabhupada, he lost Jhansi. That was a property that he had secured for his preaching. He was in the right to have that property, but the governor's wife wanted it for a tea party, for her women's tea party group, and it was taken from Prabhupada. He was the victim, and he could have been very angry and disturbed. That was all he had at that point. He had left his family and his business and everything to develop that project. somehow Krishna took it. Somehow that was Krishna's will. Prabhupada accepted it. And when we look back, we say, thank God, thank Krishna that Prabhupada lost that, because he came to New York City in 1965 and established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So we can't always understand Krishna's will, but as a Vaishnava, we will say to ourselves, everything that I experience is Krishna's mercy upon me. Somehow or other, I don't understand it, but Krishna wants something from me here. And so with that humility, we carry on. Yes, our faith might be shaken and undermined, and we might be angry with Krishna for a little while, but we should have that much faith that Krishna knows better. And he is our well-wisher and friend, and he does have our best interests at heart. And there is a lesson, and there is a plan for us in all of that. Thank you. Sorry, Devotee. Yeah, that's the breaks for now. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Chief Prahlada, for a wonderful class. Jeffrey Eckler has a question, the burning question. You have a few minutes after the darshan to address it?
Sure,
In
yeah.
the back? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Murlidhara Gaurachandra ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you for your blessings.
Jai Shri Shiva Murlidhar Shri Gaur Chandra Ki Jai.
Hari Purusham Amaham Tachami.
Okay, Shri Prahlad Prabhu, thank you so much for going this extra mile with us. Okay, Jeffrey Eckler, unmute yourself, followed by Devadatta Devidasi. Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for this class. Good morning. I had two thoughts while you were speaking, and the first was when you were speaking about kind of knowing when to kind of understand if we are to step in or to get involved. And and kind of the question was, where's that line sort of where laissez-faire becomes lazy, and where we're actually lowering the bar for ourselves by creating that distinction between where we get involved and where it's, you know, an external. And I guess the question is coming from, where's that line? Because if everything is Krishna, then why would we not get involved with anything that we have, that we're privy to? That was my first question. And then my second question was in response to the upset about you know, a kind of a practical involvement with an organization. Obviously, worship of Krishna and devotion to Krishna is divine, but a misplaced adherence to a philosophy or even the rules of ISKCON itself, ISKCON is not Sat Chit Ananda, and therefore not necessarily worthy of pure devotional service. That we are worshiping Krishna, not ISKCON, and is that a distinction that we should be very aware of?
Yeah, thank you for these two questions. In terms of where the line is and where it's lazy, I like the way you phrase that, laissez-faire versus or whether it's lazy. I can only speak for how I apply this and what I see to be whether it's my service or not. So there are devotees that I know are criticized, and maybe rightly or wrongly, but I try to encourage them. And I might encourage them in ways that a temple authority couldn't, because they have to take a line. They have to draw a line and say, no, this is our standard in our temple, and we had to make a decision to expel or whatever but as an individual, I can cross it, but as a temple of authority, they can't. And I'll tell you a story in relation to this. Lord Chaitanya, he had a servant named Kala Krishnadas, whom he took with him to South India as his assistant. And while there, Kala Krishnadas got involved with some Bharahari girls and left Lord Chaitanya to hang out with them. And then Lord Chaitanya, he went in and, picked up his assistant by the hair, dragged him out of the Bharahari camp, continued to engage him in his service until they returned to Puri. Lord Chaitanya told the devotees, the senior devotees, he said, Bharahari, this is what Kala Krishnadas has done. He is dismissed from my service. Okay, Lord Chaitanya has taken that stance. He's dismissed from my service. How did the devotees deal with him? Did they expel him or exclude him or shun him? They actually, Nityananda Prabhu arranged for him to, they found him another service. They sent him to Bengal to tell the devotees that Lord Chaitanya had returned from South India, to tell the devotees about Lord Chaitanya's activities in South India, and to invite them to come to Jagannath Puri for Rath Yatra. So Lord Chaitanya has rejected him. Nityananda Prabhu has accepted him and engaged him. Who's right, who's wrong? So another story as a follow-up. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati in Chennai, that time Madras, there was in his mutt, there was a brahmachari who misbehaved and was expelled. Sometime later, he felt remorse and he came back to the temple authorities and said, I would like to move into the ashram again. And so they approached Bhakti, they said, let's wait until Guru Maharaj is visiting. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was to be visiting in a few weeks. So when he came, the temple authorities approached him and said, this brahmachari, this is the situation. Do we allow him to stay in the ashram again? And Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati said, as the head of the institution, I cannot agree for this. He says, but as devotees, you might decide among yourselves. He said, Lord Chaitanya is very strict. Nityananda Prabhu is very merciful. As the head, I cannot agree. But yeah, you discuss and you have it among yourselves. So that line is not fixed. It's not in stone. There are, and your next question is about institutional concerns. There are, depending on our role and our authority, we may be able to be more lenient or more strict. We might be able to show more compassion, or we might have to be more in a position of setting a standard for others who follow us, look up to us, or so yeah, I don't think we can say it's this or that. Last little story in relation to that, Prabhupada in Calcutta, there was a devotee who kept messing up, like he would fight with devotees, he would, and he'd get in trouble, he would go on probation, reprimand, and then they would reinstate him in his service. And so at one point he had come up again, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj asked, Prabhupada said, Prabhupada, what should we do with him? And Prabhupada says, well, little atonement, little punishment, and then let him continue. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said to him, Prabhupada, what are the limits of our mercy? Like, how much mercy can we extend to a person? And Prabhupada said, Nityananda Prabhu's mercy is unlimited. So that's also interesting, that he took the stance of Nityananda Prabhu as opposed to Lord Chaitanya in that instance. He took the line of the devotees rather than Lord Chaitanya or Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. To your question about the institution itself, devotion to the institution, I think we could look at this more philosophically, and we see the institution as the community of devotees. It's the Bhakta Sangha. So is devotion to an institution, how did you say it? A creation of man. ISKCON is not Satchit Ananda. No, it is not. And therefore unworthy of devotional service. In principle, yes, a corporate entity is unworthy of devotional service. But the Bhakta Sangha is worthy of our devotion. Hari, Guru, Vaishnavas. Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. So Krishna is the object of our devotion. The spiritual master, the teachings, the Shastra is the object of our devotion. And the Sangha, the community of Vaishnavas, is also the object of our devotion. We cannot have Krishna without the Bhakta Sangha. So, yeah, we don't offend Krishna by offending an institution per se, but we do offend Krishna by offending his community of devotees, community of Vaishnavas. So yeah, if we're having a problem with that institution thing, see it as a community of Vaishnavas. And every living being is worthy of respect, particularly the Vaishnava. Vasudeva Sarvam Sarvamiti Samahatma, the devotee is very rare. And then a community of devotees is even more rare. And so, yeah, therefore worthy of our affection and respect and devotion.
Hare
So,
Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you for that answer.
yeah, thank you, Jeffrey.
I appreciate how the mercy of Nityananda helps us understand when the line is blurry to be able
Right.
to flex with
Right.
that line. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There's a comment here from Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Well, whether it comes from an individual or an institution, somehow or other Krishna has allowed that. So we accept that it's due to my past misdeeds, I actually deserve a lot worse. At least that's what scripture says. This is not coming from them or him. It's coming from Krishna. And ultimately, we can choose how to respond to that. We can be grateful for it and we can go on with our service. Or we can use that as an excuse to give up our service. And we heard one devotee approaching Prabhupada and saying, well, why did I get accused about things that I didn't do? And Prabhupada says, because in your past life, you did something and you think you got away with it, and now it's coming back to you. But we're advised that we should see this, I deserve a lot worse. Somehow or other, my past misdeeds. And sometimes Krishna does stuff like that to glorify the devotee, to see how they're going on. If they don't lose faith, they don't give up their sadhana, they don't humbly take a position and go on in our service. We're looking for an excuse to give up our service. That's our own miscalculation. At least that's what I've heard from Prabhupada. Krishna Guru.
Jai. Bhima Prabhu has a raised hand. Bhima Prabhu.
Haribol Prabhu, wonderful topic. Always, of course, appropriate, considering the amount of devotees and the amount of differing personalities, etc. There's always going to be conflict. And I, for one, have over the years have understood that anytime I hear a criticism directed towards me, that this is a great chance this is a great opportunity to grow. Otherwise, I wouldn't be hearing what I'm hearing. But my question is, Prabhu, more sensitive topic, that if one is privy to the abuses being perpetrated by a person in a position of authority. Now, we don't have that. I grew up in the 80s in the movement, and so this was rampant. But still, it's not that it has ceased completely. But I feel that this idea that, if I call attention to this, when somebody, not ourselves, not an abuse to ourselves or a criticism of ourselves, but if something is happening to somebody else, especially to the innocents, isn't it the duty of a Vaishnav to call it out and to be bold and courageous and to understand that's what Krishna would want, to call it out? And that is actually a coward who thinks, I might go to hell if I find fault with this person who is abusing another person. Could you answer that, Prabhu?
Yeah. Yeah, so a very, very important point. And I did raise it in the class, but I'm grateful that you're bringing it up again. When we see that other people, so yeah, we may deal with criticism of ourselves or mistreatment of ourselves, however we will. But when we see other people are being harmed, then we have a duty as a member of a community to draw attention to it. Or, yeah, I mean, if at least investigate it. Sometimes we might also be jumping to conclusion. Someone's being abused. I need to be the champion of this cause when that itself is based on rumor or projection or supposition. So there we need to be really cautious to be that we really do have grounds for concern. But when we truly do know that there is an issue, and particularly if no one else is aware, then we have a responsibility as a member of a community to involve ourselves in that. Especially if we're in a position of authority ourselves, well, others depend on us. But even if not, if somehow this situation has come to us and we are the ones who are aware of it, and there is not awareness in other circles, and it's for us to deal with it, or it won't be dealt with at all, then Krishna has given us a responsibility there to a service there to protect others, and that's a responsibility that comes with being part of a community. Does that address your question?
Shri Prahlad
Yes,
Prabhu,
yeah.
GBT.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for raising the point.
Thank you, Shri Prahlad Prabhu. Wonderful class, wonderful discussion. We turned a lot of nectar, a lot of maturity during this Afterglow session. Thank you very much. We're really happy to have you in our association. When a person like this is talking, I was like, Ananda Bihari, be quiet, just note the points. Prabhu is talking, just be quiet. There's so much nectar. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Truly. Wonderfully.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Okay. Shri Prahlad ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, everybody on this call ki jai, everybody outside this call ki jai, all the wrongfully accused, don't hold a grudge, keep on serving. Krishna knows what's going on. Don't worry. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.